You shared this on your Instagram recently, and it really stopped me in my tracks because I could relate to it. But the quote was, if it's out of your hands, it deserves freedom from your mind as well.
Yes.
And then you went on to say that life gets so much easier when you just let go, and there's so much peace in surrender. So why did you share that?
I shared it because surrendering is something that I've learned more so in my recent years. You said before that when you're feeling in fear, you control. And I resonated with that a lot because the more I fear, the more I control. So if I'm fearful of work, I'll start like emailing people, reaching out and kind of feeling like I need to do more in order to receive more. When in fact, for work, particularly for me, it's the opposite. I need to work on my energy, work on myself, take time for me. Yes, take inspired, aligned action, but never from a place of fear. So if I haven't had like money coming in, the best thing I can do is sit down and manifest money, not sit down and roguely email everyone I've worked with and do it in a panic state. So for me, it's all about controlling my energy and manifesting the right kind of work. Coming back to surrender, there's so much in our life that is completely out of our control. I would say like 90% of our life is out of our control. So if we can stop and control the things that we do every day, that's all we can control. We can control how we react. We can control what words we say. We can control what words we speak to ourselves. We can control our daily habits, meditation, going for a swim. If you're feeling stressed, how can you state change? What can you do to get yourself out of that situation? But most of the things in our life are out of our control, except for, I would say, how we respond to things and our daily habits.
Yeah, like you were saying, for me, when I do get worried about work, I overcompensate and I really try and force results. But often the best thing to do, and it's counterintuitive, is just to sit back and let things come to you and put your energy into your self-care or making sure those habits are on point so that you can nurture your energy.
I think a good example of that, especially, because obviously you and I work for ourselves, if we're in this fear mindset, in this limited mindset, and we're saying yes to events or we're saying yes to work that we don't want to do, we're actually not showing up anywhere near our potential. We're at events, we're exhausted, we don't want to be there. That is not going to generate work or wealth. What's going to generate work and wealth is sitting, really getting clear on what brands you want to work for. Do I need to pivot my own brand? What content is going to provide value? And how can I do this from a place of wholeness and back to my true self? Otherwise, jobs will come through. You'll say yes because you haven't had work in a while. It will be completely not aligned to your brand or who you are. And then you kind of just on this rat wheel, this rat race of trying to make money that's not anywhere near your brand.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think the biggest thing for us in this industry is most of the time it's a no. I say no a lot, even when I need the money.
Yeah.
But it's because I can't put my name and face and voice to that brand messaging, especially in the fitness industry.
Right.
So it's being very sure of like who you are and coming back to what your brand is and what you're willing to put your name and face and values to, because they have to align.
Also the best way to build a long-term career as well. There's no way you're going to have longevity if you're just saying yes to everything and deteriorating your brand.
Yes.
When you say yes to only the good clients and say no to the bad ones, you're also sending out a message to the universe that you're not going to settle.
Exactly. And it's also selling out to brands that might be like a fad. Like I, to this day, haven't worked with a brand that I really truly didn't believe in or used, because I would just never want to get on and say, I love this. Like that is really going to screw you up. It screw you up mentally, but then also be very conflicting to the people that follow you and trust you. You break their trust.
Speaking more broadly about abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, are you someone who naturally gravitates towards an abundance mindset, or is it something that you have to kind of remind yourself to enter? Like for me personally, there'll be, when I do have those moments where I'm fearful or the ego pipes up and tells me that I don't have enough or reverts to some of those old patterns, I have to do a meditation or pull out the journal and just remind myself that I am abundant and reinforce that?
I would say I lean more to your side of having to remind myself that I really do think it comes down to worthiness and also imposter syndrome. So I do believe that to be abundant and to trust in the universe and to trust in your own value and self-worth, it comes down to whether or not you have imposter syndrome, which is if you believe in yourself. And I often have to remind myself of my worth or remind myself of, particularly if I've lost a job or I've lost a substantial amount of money, which happens quite often, I have to remind myself that this is just a part of the job and detach from the outcome. You understand, you get a brief, you get a job, might be like a dream brand. They come back and they'll say, this is what we want to pay you. And you're like, what? Like, I'm worth more than that. Yeah. So it's this constant, because for social media, obviously you and I do a lot more out of social media. But speaking of social media, so much of our income is in the hands of our agents and in the hands of the brands that want to work with us or repeat work with us. So because of that, it can be difficult to have this constant state of work comes to me, work, it's easy, it flows in. Because the reality is there's someone younger with more followers who's off the back of a TV show or someone who's more relevant that's like right at your heels.
Right.
So it's this fine balance of, one, creating an abundance mindset through journaling, through meditation, through visualization, through writing a letter to yourself or however you create an abundance mindset versus what's actually in front of us, which is a lot of setbacks and having to have a lot of resilience. Like people don't see the jobs that you miss or the shows that you miss. They only see the wins. But to get there is a hell of a lot of like self-talk and self-motivation because we don't have a boss, right? No one like wakes us up and is like, time to go.
Yeah.
It's like you have to create your own discipline, routines and your own motivation.
How do you go with that? Because looking at you, you're an incredibly fit person. Like you're obviously very disciplined with that side of things, having to create your own structure and routines.
Yeah.
How do you go with that?
Innately, I'm disciplined. I don't know if I'm innately disciplined, but I grew up as an athlete. So I spent my whole life training and I spent 10 years of my life coached with two incredible coaches and a team. So when I say a team, physio, a strength and conditioning coach, sprint coach, and then I was in the Australian team. So for a lot of my life, discipline was something that I learnt, and I know I'm disciplined now because I'm 30 and I started at 4, so I've had 26 years of a pretty disciplined life.
Yeah.
So discipline is an easy thing for me now. It was actually learning the opposite of being able to rest and have more flow, be more in my feminine and allow myself time to be creative. So for me, it's a really fine balance. I need routine. I need my non-negotiables for my mental health, but I also need to have some flexibility in there.
Sure.
So to give you an example, I don't like to pull out on people or events, and I'm very integral with my word.
Right.
But on the other hand, if I'm feeling run down, maybe I'm having a bad mental health day, I just need some alone time, having a boundary in there and being okay to say no to someone else, to say yes to me is something that's taken me quite a long time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So routines and structure is necessary, but there also has to be some flexibility.
Yeah.
It has to be serving you in every way. Your routine must serve you. If it's coming from a place of fear, if you're going to the gym because you hate your body, that's no way to live.
Sure.
If you're working because you're afraid that you're not going to pay your bills, that's hard. It really does come down to shifting your mindset.
Trying to bring in those feminine qualities when you're very rigid or very good with your discipline and rigid with your routine. I think I also dance between managing that masculine and feminine energy,
yes,
especially with a self-motivated work, because on one hand, it's great to be disciplined, get up at the same time and create, but because it is a creative job, sometimes you can't just sit down and create something.
At 9 a.m.
Exactly. So it's about having a bit of nuance and compassion for yourself trying to move between those two things, and I don't know if I'll ever get that balance right.
Well, every day is different, right? Like I was saying to you this morning, I was running late because I had to re-edit a video that was going to go up today. But most of the time I try and structure my day depending on how I feel in the morning, which kind of seems ridiculous. But if I wake up and I'm feeling really tired and run down, I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm actually just going to have a sauna or go for a walk or maybe just lay in bed. So I think, when you are working for yourself, burnout is such a real thing. Burnout's such a real thing in general. But if you do have autonomy over your schedule and you can be flexible with your routine, I usually ask myself, what do I actually need today? What does my soul need? And sometimes that's not sitting down at my desk at 8 o'clock to get this work done. It's giving myself the grace and the time to meditate, to journal, to go for a walk, to have a swim, to do some breath work, to do something that recenters me, to then come back at a time that feels more appropriate and get that work done when I have a clear mind. Because I can get really clouded and really scattered easily.
Is it hard for you to identify what your soul needs in that moment? Because maybe you wake up tired and a training at the gym might actually help you, might revitalize you. Or maybe a sauna is going to serve you better. Is it hard to work out which one's going to be best?
No, it's very easy for me. I think now, it never used to be. I pushed my body to its absolute limits to my detriment. Like my health was in a really bad way. That's why I retired early.
Right.
So now I'm very strict on my own physical boundaries because I didn't trust myself for a very long time. I would push myself to the limits constantly. And I ended up in hospital a few times. So it's like now I know, hey, what do I actually need right now? And I'll do like a body check. How am I feeling? I've been injured. So I'm like, how's my hip feeling? How's my back feeling? Out of 10, how's my energy? Like I'll do like a check-in every day, really. Physically, that's quite easy, but mentally it's not. So I struggle with the mental check-in because I'm so good at pushing through most things. And I think physically it's easy because you can go, I've got a bit of a sore throat or I'm a bit sore. Like physically I know that a sauna is going to help me more, or just laying in bed or just having a stretch. So physically I know that the gym's not right for me today. But mentally it's kind of hard because there's a few things you can do to state change and change your cognitive health. But in these moments, like if I'm feeling anxious, there are a lot of things that I can do, but there's a lot of things that I avoid when I'm anxious as well. So I struggle more so with having boundaries for my mental health than I do physically, because physically I've been at this forever.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're well drilled in that.
Yeah.
And so what was the straw that broke that eventually made you retire?
Well, I actually had so I was training for world titles in Holland. I was a sprinter. I was a beach sprinter and I was Australian champion. I'm coming into junior world champion, coming in wanting to be the senior world champion in a different age group. I retired at like 23, 24, which is quite young, but I reached my peak at like 19 and I'd been doing it for so many years that I was really burnt out and I was really running from a place of fear, and so much of my confidence, self-esteem and sense of worth was external. Everything was external. It was people clapping for me, seeing me on TV. Like I had to be winning or I was a failure. Like so much of my worth and identity was tied up in sport. And unfortunately, I had this attitude of if I'm not first, I'm last, which is a shocking attitude, and it did not serve me. It served me in the short term, but in the long term, I had to, through therapy, unlearn so many of these behaviors.
Where all of your reward mechanisms were extrinsic.
Yes. And it's taken me a really long time to break that because obviously being in this industry, a lot of our rewards are also external.
Yeah.
So the straw that broke the camel's back for me was I had a really bad chest infection, sinus infection and chest infection that continued, and I trained through it constantly. I would train through all my sicknesses and all my injuries. Psychotic, really, because I wanted to win and I thought that my body was a machine and I just thought I am going to do everything right. And I thought I was doing everything right, but I was neglecting my emotional health. I was neglecting my mental health, and I was very much neglecting my spiritual health. I didn't really know who I was outside of running.
Yeah.
And also the pressure was just wild for me that I put on myself. I only told myself that I could retire if I won this race. And I had already won it, but I needed to win it in this older age group to prove to myself that I was good.
Right, yeah.
That I was, that all of this, this my life's work was put on this race. That's literally what it was. I was like, this is my life's work in this race. I'm going to Holland, and I just killed myself to get there. So I was coming in the fittest and fastest I'd ever been. I was set to win, and I was training through this chest infection, which then turned into bronchiolitis. I was taken to hospital with fear of pneumonia, and the doctor said I had severe bronchiolitis and I was really struggling to breathe, and he said, you can't fly. So I was sitting at home. I obviously cancelled everything, cancelled my flights, cancelled the whole thing, had to tell my coaches, had to tell my sponsors, and was sitting in the hospital bed being like, what is my life? Like, what am I putting all this pressure on myself for? Like, I don't feel whole. I don't feel like a human if I can't do this. And I really just pushed myself to the absolute limit. So I retired in what felt like was a really sad way. And I still have some healing. I still have healing to do with it, being this many years on. But if it wasn't for reaching complete rock bottom, and then I was quite depressed after that, had a car crash after that. There's a few things that kind of fell apart. And it was a physical fall apart because I was neglecting all the other parts of my health. And the podcast was born after that.
Yeah.
I started working with women. I had a business called Real Talk where I did women's workshops, and I started to understand the energetic body, the emotional body. I started meditating. I started journaling. I started doing really deep therapy, and I started to understand who I was without sport.
Right.
And that was my whole life. So if it wasn't for me not getting my retiring race and pushing myself to the limit, I wouldn't be who I am now.
Yeah, it's funny how that was quite a blessing in disguise where it really forced you to evolve and step into that next chapter.
Yeah, like I was such a psycho. I was so masculine and so driven and so, like obsessed. And that obsession is needed as an athlete.
I bet.
But it does not serve you in the real world.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, did it take a real, was it a process really shifting your identity and finding out who you were, forming that new self-identity without sport, without sprinting?
Yes. I was an athlete for my whole life until I retired. And then when I retired, I was like, well, I'm still an athlete, but like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I still haven't found that.
Interesting.
I still have that competitor in me and I still have that athlete in me. But the athlete comes out when I have deadlines and when I'm working on a project.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the tools I've learned as an athlete now translate into my workspace. But I still like I'll train, I want to do an MMA fight. I've never done MMA. Yes. But I still have this missing link in my life that because I'm not an elite athlete anymore, that's still missing because it's that challenge. It's fuck, like there's thousands of people watching me right now. Like it's just this rush.
Yeah.
And without finding ways to fill that rush, you can go into a dark place.
You did Ninja Warrior, didn't you? Yeah. Was that, I'm just thinking now, was that...
I wiped out.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, babe.
Was that an attempt to find that rush?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely. There's a lot of things I did in the past that were to fill a void, to make me feel like I was good enough, which, it's not a very nice place to be in. And a lot of the things I did after retiring were to fill the void. I spent a lot of years partying and avoiding my feelings and trying to feel that scent, that rush that I had. Whereas now, like, I can have an ice bath and get the rush. Right. I can work on a project and get the rush. I can get on stage and speak and get that rush. I'm finding it's taking me a long time to find really healthier, more productive ways of getting that sense of adrenaline.
That also nourish your body as well.
Yes, don't take away from it. But I did years and years of not looking after myself. Yeah. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with being an athlete. There's this other side of you that's like this shadow self. It was quite destructive at times.
Do you have to work hard with your training these days not to let that shadow self overrun it and overtrain you to the point where you might get injured or overtrain?
No, I think now because my physical body is always the first to go. For me, it's like I've actually been quite run down for a month now. And I know that is because I'm not dealing with my emotional side. So it comes out physically for me. So my dog just died recently and I've had this issue with my lungs and grief is stored in the lungs.
Right.
So I'm a lot more aware now. I'm very into energy work. And I do think that the body carries a lot of trauma and the body shows you physical ailments that are a lot to do with emotional trauma or things that you haven't processed. So I'm very intuitive with that now. I don't push my body like I used to. I actually haven't trained in a whole month, which is very unlike me. But I've been going through a lot emotionally and I've allowed my body the time to rest because my immune system's been low. So I would say now I'm extremely intuitive with my body and I don't see myself falling back into any kind of overtraining because I feel that it almost ruined my life. You've got to reach these points where you're like, wow, I'm not going to do that again. Because it was the detriment. It's why I retired. So I have much better boundaries now, but it took me a very, very long time to get there.
You said you've just got back from a trip.
Yes.
So was this an intentional break from work and training or was it just a holiday?
Yeah. My girlfriend and I did 2 months away, no work at all.
Brilliant.
We did some training over there, but I got really sick in Colombia.
Oh, did you?
And ended up in hospital. And then Georgia hurt her back. So it was quite interesting. I think the trip on paper looked like this beautiful, magic, incredible trip, which it was so great. But we had some serious hiccups.
Right.
Like going to hospital in Colombia is rough.
Yeah.
It's like a shanty hospital. I don't know how we didn't get robbed there, hectic. And then we had a few days where Georgia couldn't walk. So I'm she hurt her back in the gym.
Oh, no.
So this is in Mexico. I had to get a doctor to come to the house. I had to try and get medicine. There's massive language barrier. I'm having to roll out of bed, walk her so she can pee in the shower. So I think it was we had it was such a beautiful trip and I loved it. I didn't work. So yes, it was an intentional break. But we definitely had some bonding experiences, her and I.
Right. Yeah. What were the lessons you took out of those little moments of getting sick or injured?
I think I already know that you can never take your health for granted and without your health you have nothing. So that was just another reminder, which, that's definitely a massive one for me anyway. But I think for her and I, it was that, you think travel is going to be just this bliss, incredible experience, which it definitely was. But there's I got robbed. I had clothes stolen from a hotel. We had a really bad experience on a bus on the way to Colombia. And then when I arrived that night, I was violently ill, taken to hospital. So it's I think you just can't have any expectations. You just got to roll with the punches. We also always had cash on us because wherever you are, if we didn't have our cash and passports in the hospital, they would have not taken me in. So it's I think you've got to be prepared for emergencies, but also surrender to the fact that you don't have any control in this country. You are foreigners. And we did Mexico, we did parts of Mexico in Puerto Escondido. We did Colombia, and then we did West Hollywood, which was really eye-opening.
Was it?
Yeah, lots of homeless people, lots of drugs. So I guess actually my biggest lesson was how blessed we are and feeling so privileged to come back to a country that is so safe. And that we are so lucky to have a roof over our heads and to be able to afford food and a warm bed because there is a lot going on. Since COVID, traveling was really eye-opening.
Interesting. It takes about 2 or 3 weeks to really unwind. Did it take a while to unwind for you guys?
Yeah, definitely. I've never taken any longer than 2 weeks off in general, and I've always worked. So I've never actually had a proper break. And that was confronting for me. I was really scared. I was saying no to work in the lead up and then I lost a lot of work because I was going away. Yeah. And that is it's the same thing. You've got to surrender. The work will come back. The brands will come back. I wanted to launch the podcast before. I didn't do that. I ran out of time. And then so I kind of started the trip off being fuck, do I deserve this break? Have I worked hard enough to get this break? So that took me a real, and I'm innately very self-critical and can be hard on myself. So
Sure.
it took me a few weeks to be like, hey, I deserve this rest. Even if I didn't tick off the things that I wanted to do, even if I didn't make this certain amount of money, I will make it back. It is a constant rewiring of the negative thought patterns because they're so easily slide in. Even that, like, I don't deserve to have a break because I've haven't worked that hard. It's like, well, what?
Where does that come from?
Well, working hard for me is like really fucking myself.
Sure.
So
Interesting.
it's
well, your benchmark is so high. Yeah, you need to sort of readdress that and bring it down to earth a little bit.
Rejig like what my priorities are, and then also not be so bloody hard on myself.
Yeah. What about just waking up and accepting that you didn't have tasks to do that day or you didn't have a checklist of work items to do? Did that take a while to get used to?
Oh my God, totally. And then also like I was still on social media the whole time, like filming the whole process.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't actually get offline.
Well, that's
at
the
all.
thing.
Like it is hard. I think if I don't mind that that's the way I am because it means that I have, been productive, but it's also honoring that for your subconscious and to be creative and to actually have clarity, you need to have a proper break.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a really fine balance.
It is it's tricky. But you do seem like you're able to naturally share those candid, real moments. Does that come naturally to you? Do you feel comfortable sharing those private day-to-day things?
Yeah, I think like if you're on social media, there is a certain amount that is required for you to share. I still remain very private in what's going on in my life. I mean, I think, everyone thinks that I've probably tough or got my shit together. It's actually completely incorrect. I'm very emotional and I definitely have really rough days. I choose to not share them because I want my page to be, I really think that Instagram and social media is something that can really dramatically affect your energy. So if you watch someone that's sad or you watch someone that's angry or watch someone that's having a rant, I actually feel my body has a response to that.
Yeah.
So for me, even though I do share and be vulnerable sometimes on my Instagram, I want people to come to my page and be like, oh, I feel good. I feel alive. I'm learning. I don't want it to be like, oh, I feel sorry for her or like she's got some shit going down right now, which we do. But I don't know. I've kind of always wanted to keep my page positive and
aspirational,
real, I guess. And that means for me, if I'm having a bad day, I don't actually feel like showing up and like crying on camera or showing that. I probably could do a little bit more, but that for me feels also quite scary.
And that's where you have your podcast to really champion the practices and tools you use to overcome those bad days as well. It just doesn't really necessarily live on your Instagram page.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, like for you, same thing with the podcast. It's like people can actually get to know you and know what's going on in your life because Instagram is a very small snapshot of what you decide to share.
Absolutely.
Whereas the podcast is very unfiltered and TikTok's kind of unfiltered too, and stories, more behind the scenes of your life. It's a fine balance between letting people in enough. But I always find that when I talk about really personal things, like I recently spoke about getting diagnosed with ADHD and my DMs, there was about 300 people, like they just blew up talking about their ADHD. So that's also hard because I want to share what's going on in my life, but I can't hold space for all 101,000 Instagram people that
for sure.
like come then, which I do my best so much to reply to everyone and to respond. Sometimes if it's a big message, particularly around sexuality, I will actually voice note back. But it's hard because you can actually spend 5 hours replying to people and that is really hard. And that's not work. That's just being able to give back to someone that you don't know, and that's hard. And I can't hold space for that many people, particularly on big things like ADHD, sexuality. Like I'm actually not equipped to deal with that.
And it's just impractical. There's no way you can get back to everybody. No. It's just not I've always thought the Instagram DMs are just not a great way to reply to people all at once.
Yeah.
And that's why I've set up an online community where people can come and actually have proper chats. And,
oh, really?
Yeah. It's just an online platform. It's called The Village, and people can get in there and connect with other listeners of the show.
Oh my God, fun.
So I jump in at becomng.com.
Oh my God, it's a website.
It's a website.
Babe, well done.
Thank you. It's kind of like Slack, but an online community just for listeners of the show.
What is Slack?
Slack's like a productivity tool for companies. People have a Slack channel, and on the side there's little discussion boards. So one might be podcast, one might be nutrition, and you can jump in there and have conversations, because if someone's asking me a question on DMs, there's a good chance someone else has already asked it.
Oh my God, that's so clever.
Yeah, I'll show you it. I'll send you the thing.
That's so cool.
Thanks.
Go you. And also giving back, like it feels good.
And also just, like we were saying before, deepen that connection with your community.
Yeah.
Beyond just a 30-second skit on Instagram.
I know.
It's important. So with your ADHD diagnosis, was there an event that made you see a doctor? Was this something that you've been battling for a while?
I think I've always known I was ADHD, but it was masked very well through exercise. So exercise has been proven to be the most powerful and potent, I don't want to say remedy, but like treatment for ADHD above medication. So exercise, because I was a professional athlete for all of my life. I started at 4. Exercise was the thing that grounded me, made me feel myself. If I'm not exercising, I don't feel like myself. Like I actually don't.
Yeah.
So I think I've always known I was ADHD, but then during lockdown, I really struggled. I struggled not seeing people. I struggled not having anywhere to go. I struggled not being able to go to the gym. Obviously, everyone struggled in lockdown, but the biggest thing for me was realizing I actually can't focus when I don't have my routines and I don't have somewhere to be and I don't have things to look forward to. And focusing at home on my own, which I work from home now, but I really struggled being confined and being completely out of my routines. And for my whole life, I've had routines. I've had structure, I've had discipline, and I've also worked for myself. So I've never had a boss. So I've masked, is that the right word? So many of the ADHD patterns. But when I went into lockdown, I was like, fuck, maybe my brain isn't normal. Maybe I am really different. But because I was always distracted and doing things and socializing and having all these things that kind of
Band-Aid solutions.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I realized that, God, I'm really struggling at home. And I was really struggling to focus and I was getting so distracted. Whereas now I know I can go to the gym, I can go for a sauna, I can have an ice bath, I can catch up with a friend, I can get out and do things that make me feel more calm, less scattered and more grounded. So during lockdown, it was just kind of like a big eruption of realizing that I have ADHD. And I got diagnosed, but it took me a really long time.
Sure, yeah. What are some of the main comments you'll get from those 300 people on Instagram from your audience who reach out about ADHD? Is there any sort of one common question that you can address in bulk?
Oh, I think a lot of the questions I get is how did you know? How did you get diagnosed? What is the process? What ADHD do you have? So I'm ADHD combined type, which is hyperactive and inattentive. So I've got both, not just one.
Yeah, you do.
What a star. And obviously I can't diagnose anyone with ADHD. I never would. I've only ever kind of recently shared how I got diagnosed and I guess kind of what my symptoms is the wrong word, but like traits are.
Yeah, sure.
Because ADHD just doesn't really go away. It's not something that you can be like, there's definitely days that are worse and there's days that are better. But for me, it has a lot to do with how I emotionally regulate, what's going into my life, how I'm responding to it, and what my daily habits are. So when I'm not exercising, when I'm not taking time for myself, when I'm saying yes to too many things, I am not giving myself enough time to emotionally regulate. And I actually have now had to take a lot out of off my plate and specifically do things that really move the needle because I can get so distracted by the little things that I can kind of do all these little things in a day and then be like, oh, now I've got to do that big task that I should have done in the morning.
Yeah.
So a lot of the questions, I really had a rant then, but a lot of the questions I get is, how do you manage your time? Because that's something that ADHD people struggle with. How do you emotionally regulate? What exercise do you do? But these are questions that I actually can't answer from a place of any medical experience. So I often just reply with what I do, and then I say, you need to go speak to a medical professional, because like there's a lot of stuff on TikTok which works and like fun little like hacks. But at the end of the day, everyone's ADHD, I guess, is different.
Yeah.
A lot of us have like an umbrella version of ADHD. Mine's a very clinical version. But there's people with ADD, which is inattentive, that don't have the hyperactivity. So they might just be someone that zones out or struggles a bit with conversation. Maybe they get overwhelmed in social environments. I do as well. But because I'm hyperactive, I can mask it.
Right.
So it's an interesting one. I'm learning a lot about ADHD, which I will share a lot about on my channel as well. But so many of the questions are questions that I actually can't answer.
Sure.
Because it's such a fickle
and personal to that person as well.
And different for everyone.
Yeah. If you wake up and having a shit day with regards to emotion regulation, what tools do you have, or what practices do you rely on the most to turn that around? What are some of your favorite tools in your toolbox for that?
I kind of go in and out of two states. So one is overstimulated or anxious. I like to say overstimulated. Or sometimes I'll tell myself if I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling alive today. Like my heart is racing, I'm feeling alive. So in situations like that and I'm feeling really anxious, the best thing for me to do is to kind of match that energy. So if I'm really anxious, I'm not going to sit down and journal because my thoughts are scattered.
Sure.
It's unclear. So if I'm feeling really scattered or anxious, I like to do the physiological sigh, which is by Dr. Andrew Huberman, which is a double inhale through the nose and an exhale through the mouth. That is like an instant state change. That will bring your cortisol down straight away.
How many times do you do that?
Normally about 5 rounds.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like as many rounds as you want. But I normally just, honestly, if you do it properly, you only need like 5 rounds.
Yeah, wow.
And I do it throughout the day. If I'm feeling anxious, running really helps me, or walking.
Yeah.
But there's no point in trying to sit down and journal if I'm feeling anxious. If I'm the opposite and I'm feeling, cold shower or an ice bath. If you don't have your hands on an ice bath, obviously that's hard. But a cold shower is really good. Also just lying on the floor. Like if I'm feeling really anxious, I'll lie on the floor and I'll just put my hands on my heart and I'll just call in like bright white light. Or like, I'm actually not religious, but sometimes like I'll pray and I'll just like take a moment.
Yeah.
Connect to my higher self, connect to higher spirit, and just fucking breathe.
Yeah.
It depends on kind of what anxiety I'm feeling at the time. Journaling for me, I struggle with if I'm feeling anxious because I actually just can't get the words out. So if I'm feeling really anxious, I'll voice note in my phone and type it out because I'm just getting it out. I'm just like talking to myself. Like I might be like, fuck, what just happened? That was so like, and talk it out. And then I don't actually have to bother my girlfriend or my mum or someone by trauma dumping. I can literally just say it and then I'm like, oh, I feel so much better. It's a bit weird.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. And then if I'm feeling like low or I need energy or if I'm feeling flat, journaling is a really good one for me because I'm calm enough and slow enough to have the thoughts come out really naturally and slowly. If I'm feeling flat or low, I don't often exercise until I've kind of gotten my energy back up or I've identified what the emotional issue is. So like I said, recently I've been grieving. So I don't feel like exercising. And because I've spent so much time exercising, I will actually wait for those emotions to pass. And often that is through breath work. The emotions will come up a lot during breath work. My subconscious will come alive when I'm journaling or meditating. And then often when I've processed those emotions, my energy will come back up. Getting in the ocean, getting in the sunshine, having a sauna, kind of being slow. And more often than not, once I've given myself the time and the grace and the love that I need, my energy starts to come back up.
Interesting.
But I try not to force myself out of that too much.
Sure.
When I was flat, I used to just go exercise.
Yeah.
But I'm actually just suppressing what emotions need to come up because when the emotions come up, I've processed them fast And then I self-regulated and I can actually just get on with what I needed to get on with.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear just how aware of you are of the different energy states and what you can do to tailor it to each one of those.
Yeah.
When you have those hyperactive, anxious thoughts,
Yeah.
that there's no point journaling them out because it's like spewing out into a piece of paper.
Doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, I've done that before and it's just rambling. It's not actually helping. In those moments, you have that hyperactive energy, so that's when you kind of need to burn it off with a walk or a run or just focus on your breathing.
Also, it's like nothing will shock you more than an ice bath.
Right.
So it's like if you are feeling really anxious, getting in an ice bath is it stresses you out so much that you have to stay calm. So it's like almost, it does actually push these feelings out of you. I hate ice bathing, but I just started doing it. But I will do the same in the cold shower. Nothing takes your breath away more than a cold shower or getting in the ocean.
Yeah, not as cold, but does the job.
It does the job.
Are you ice bathing at home? Do you do that on a daily?
No, I was ice bathing in Bali a lot and in Mexico on our trip. Yeah. I'm not ice bathing a lot, but I was, and it was helping me a lot. With ADHD is a dopamine deficit. So things like social media and scrolling on TikTok or getting any kind of like cheap dopamine really fucks you up. So in any way you can get natural dopamine through sunshine, exercise, and ice bathing gives you a 200% increase in dopamine, which Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about, and Breathwork does. These tools that help your dopamine, it's not just people with ADHD. If you're feeling flat, you likely are feeling low in dopamine or serotonin for whatever reason. But having those little tools to help pick you up works a treat. Or just sleeping in, giving yourself a rest.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you have a morning routine that you follow, or is it based on how you're feeling on the day?
I used to have a really rigid morning routine, very rigid, and now I'll always make my bed. I always have coffee. I'll always sit, and I don't leave the house until I'm feeling like I've woken up.
Interesting.
So I don't rush out the door ever. I actually take a few hours to get going in the morning, so I honour that. I do journal in the morning. Sometimes I don't. I always plan my day. So my day is very structured. I know and I color code where I am, where I'm going to be, how long it's going to take. Like that's pretty controlled.
Right.
And I will plan out my day like that. Like I said, we don't have a boss. So like if you don't, I have deadlines. It all has to be organized. Sure. So journaling, mapping out my day, sitting, having coffee, having quiet time. And then often I'll actually do listen to a podcast in the morning as well. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to introduce meditation again, but because I haven't been meditating, I'll start off literally with like 2 or 5 minutes. Or I also listen to a hypnosis by Marissa Peer. So I do actually have a morning routine, but depending on what I need in that day, I kind of change it.
Sure.
Yeah. So if I'm feeling anxious, won't do any breath work or meditation until I've done some exercise or I've done something it kind of goes in order.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if I need to exercise and I'm feeling anxious, there's no point trying to sit down and be still. I can do some breath work or some meditation. Sometimes it's just in the car after the gym just to recenter. But it's kind of got to go in order. But it's taken me a long time to figure out what order that is.
What the order it is. And if you throw coffee in there, you can't do that before your meditation. So there are a little bit of nuance about how you place those things. If you're doing a breath work in the car, is that the same Huberman physiological sigh?
Physiological sigh. Physiological sigh is something that I do to upregulate. So that's something if I need energy, it definitely de-stresses you, but that's something that I like to do to give myself more oxygen. If I'm trying to be more mindful and be more slow, I will do the box breath. So that's in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, repeat. Very similarly is the 4-7-8. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8, which is a longer exhale. So for me, if I'm trying to bring more oxygen in the body, it is a faster breath. And if I'm trying to de-stress and de-calm my body, it is a longer out breath.
Interesting.
So I guess depending on how I'm feeling, I'll change up what kind of breath work I'm doing.
Sure.
But it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can literally breathe and repeat the mantra, let go.
Right.
Like whatever works for you. You can Google them, you can watch them on YouTube, even just putting your hand on your heart and just feeling your heartbeat while you breathe.
One of the breath works I do that I've spoken about a few times on this podcast is it's very similar to a physiological sigh where you're doing 2 inhales and 1 exhale, but it's more rapid and you do it for a longer period of time.
Fun.
It's great. And by the end of it, I am just in this euphoric bliss. I'm not sure what it's called. It's on a YouTube video that I'll link.
Yeah,
and
can
I'll
you
send
send
to
it
you for sure.
Yeah.
But I found it so powerful. If I'm feeling wound up or stressed, I'll do this breath work, and it goes for about half an hour. But by the end of that, you're able to just clearly see what's stressing you out, what's good in your life, what's important to your life.
Hey, please send that.
It's
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've done some breath work, holotropic breath work that's brought back memories from when I was a kid.
Really?
So like breath work is extremely powerful.
So powerful.
Yeah. I did this big journey in Bali actually, and I couldn't believe what was coming up. Just old memories. I'm like, what? It's amazing that through breath work you can tap into your subconscious. Like how through breath can you have memories come up? It's bizarre.
When you first started living with G, was there any sort of, with what you were speaking about before with your control that might be spilled over from your career in athletics, was there any things like that came into the relationship that you had to address?
Yes, plenty.
Is she just going to be nodding?
Yeah. Bless her. She's she loves control too. So we both love control. I would say that I am a lot better with surrendering. I would say that I probably go with the flow a lot more now. But in our relationship, I definitely have come to the table as like Coach Katie or like even this morning I sent her a list of like, we should have non-negotiables in our relationship, and sometimes I'm like, fuck, that's so intense. But like it like having these, and sometimes I do have to check myself because I can get quite serious about this stuff. Like self-development for me, like you, is my number one. Like I am obsessed with self-development. I listen to self-development podcasts every day. I have for 10 years. Like this space for me is amazing. Like I love looking at things that need improving and tweaking, but that is not necessary in a it is necessary in a relationship, but it's also like a lot. So many times she said to me, can you just chill out? Like I feel like there's pressure on us. I feel like there's pressure on me. Like, can we just like have fun? And it's easy, which we do have so much fun, but it is easy for me to slip back into, I would say like, Coach Katie or athlete Katie, or like, let's do this and let's talk about this and what did you mean about that? And I can be very critical and analyze things, and that hasn't served me in our relationship. So the reason why I was talking about the non-negotiables is we both work from home, and she doesn't have as much alone time as me. And I think, I said to her it's important for both of us, which she agreed. She actually said to me, I need more alone time, because when we both work for ourselves, we're home all day, we might muck around together, but we haven't been having enough alone time so that we miss each other. But even like she said to me yesterday, can we not talk about work after 6 p.m? So I love talking about work. I can be obsessed with work.
Yeah.
And I think about things, I'm excited, and like it's so easy for me to like funnel into something, like whether that's from being an athlete or ADHD or just obsessed with things. So having non-negotiables, like days where I go work from, like a friend of mine has an office space now, or go to the library. So she has alone time. That's important. And that's going to be hopefully non-negotiable now. It's like there's specific days where she gets the house to herself. I go to the library, or maybe I'm recording and I give her that space.
Yeah.
And the no work chat, because I do talk a lot about work.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, it has come into our relationship a lot. But it's important to have the balance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think that's incredibly relatable, especially where most people were working from home together. It's an interesting point about having time alone so that you miss each other. But it's also, I find I need that time alone to reflect on myself as well, and have those nights with the journal, be like, oh, yep, this came up on the weekend. How can I address that and move forward?
Yeah.
Because, I'm in a relationship now, and while we're not living together, we'll go 4 days together on the weekend. And I don't have those moments to myself where I'm able to just sort of regroup and recenter. So that must be difficult when you do start living together, to try and find those moments. So it is cool that you guys have.
You have to. And then, it's like, how do you create enough space so that there's desire, and enough space that you are not feeling each other's emotions? It's very different as well with two women, because there's a lot more emotions. I've previously dated men. So it has been different, because there's just a lot more emotions. It's like a sixth sense you have.
Yeah.
Like I can look at her and like, I know what you're thinking. She can look at me and be like, I know what you think. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so creating space is important. And, because I work for myself, obviously I have a beautiful manager who I can bounce ideas off, but I have always been a solo person. So I don't have a boss to talk to. I don't get feedback. I don't have my compass is all internal. So sometimes I'm like, do you think this is a good idea? Can you help me with this? But she's doing her work. So she's building her business. I'm building mine. And it's sometimes hard to have boundaries because more so for me, because I'm on my own so much, I'm like, she can't be my go-to for everything. Which is why journaling is something that is it's actually more important for me to do now because I don't want to come to her and sometimes I can a lot of the time I can figure this shit out on my own.
Yeah.
So it is having boundaries and respecting each other's peace.
Sure.
I think.
Because she's a makeup artist and
yes.
she would be receiving that from clients. She'd be seeing clients all day and bouncing things off her.
Yeah.
So maybe after 6 p.m. she just wants to shut off.
Yeah.
Whereas you're like, because you've been working in isolation.
I've been home all day and I'm like, hey, baby. She's like, shh.
Bring it on in. Man, I can relate to that so hard.
Well, you're home. I think as well, if you're sitting at home all day, let's say you've been editing all day or you've been on your emails all day or you've been filming or something, haven't had social interaction. So your partner walks through the door and you're like, hey, how are ya? And they're like, I'm fucking tired. And you're
exhausted.
Like, okay.
Yeah. Zoe works in a corporate job.
Yeah.
So she's going off to the city Tuesday to Thursday, 9 till 5. Sometimes it's not quite shame, but I feel a little bit.
Yes.
There's something about working at home all day and being at home all day. And she comes to him and I'm like, oh, no, I've just been here at the same spot you left me. And just a little bit. It's not shame, but you know what I mean? It's like,
Well, it's kind of feeling a little bit like you're not working.
Yeah.
But it's like you almost have to prove yourself. Look what I've done today.
Yeah.
Because it's like I've done a lot. It's just that you can't see it. Or it might be going back and forth with a client on a video and it's like you only really see the finished product, but you haven't seen the behind the scenes how long it took to get to here.
Yeah, and that's why the podcast is so good because I can sit down with people for an hour and connect.
Get that fix.
Yeah, get the connection fix.
Yeah.
And so, I've just loved to see how much you're owning your sexuality in the last couple of years. If you had some advice for listeners who are sort of either questioning theirs or just coming to terms with accepting their sexuality, what piece of advice would you offer them?
The question that I had to ask myself when I was struggling with my sexuality was, what is my heart telling me? And it's very hard to remove, especially with sexuality, because there's so many societal beliefs and judgment from the external. What do I actually feel? I had a lot of homophobic internal beliefs that weren't mine. I came from a Catholic school. I didn't grow up knowing anyone gay. I didn't have any visibility on anyone that everyone was just straight. So, I moved out to the city and realized, there's bi girls, there's bi guys, there's this whole world. There's lesbians, there's gays, there's queers, whatever, however you identify, there's everyone. And there's so much more visibility and acceptance. I had to, the question that kept me so strong in my sexuality was, what is my heart telling me? Because my heart was telling me so different to what my mind was telling me. So my heart and my intuition was telling me to lean in. This is scary, but lean in. And then my head was saying, what the fuck? You've been straight your whole life. I was never fully straight, but for most of my life I was straight. And then it was only in the last 4 or 5 years where I've questioned what I felt, and I was starting to feel different to what I felt for most of my life. But at my core, I was being guided by my intuition. I was being guided by my heart, and my head would get involved and be like, what are you doing? You think you're gay now? I had all these thoughts and I was like, these are not my thoughts, because my heart was just saying, just lean in. You're going to be okay. Just do what feels right. You got to test the waters. And I tested the waters and I was like, this is fun. I like this. And it wasn't that long into my sexuality journey that I met Georgia. It was about 2 years of doing therapy, thank God, and also exploring my sexuality. So when I met her, I was like, because I met her and I was like, I'm never going to date a girl. I just had that attitude. I'm not going to date a girl. I'm just having a bit of fun. I was kind of leaning in, you know?
Yeah.
And I hadn't met someone that I really liked. And I was also like seeing a guy. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
But once again, I was like, what is my intuition telling me? What is my heart telling me? Like, can I just like lean in with curiosity and not let my mind and anxious thoughts like creep in? Because they're actually not mine. And they actually weren't. So by the time I met Georgia, I had like a crush on her and I was like, oh my God, this feels really good. And then I started to develop love. So I had to constantly just come back to heart, head, gut, because heart and gut work kind of similarly. And the head just has nothing to do with anything. Like you can't lead from the head. I don't lead from the head unless you're in a situation where you need to really solve a problem.
Sure.
But this is not a problem to solve. It is a problem. It is not a problem. It is something that you need to sit with and you need to let yourself expand in. And it's been really beautiful to see that evolve and to sit here now really proud of who I am, because it's very different to who I was.
And would you say to people listening that, like you were saying, it doesn't have to be this huge thing that they're making out in their head. They can just lean in, see what it's like. They don't have to commit to it for life. They just can explore and
yeah, babe. Like what freaked me out was I slept with a girl and then I just had like 2 weeks of thinking that I was now a lesbian. And I remember being like driving in the car being like, I'm gay now. Like what? And I didn't know who to talk to about it. And I was like, this is so weird. I don't know anyone who's gay. Am I gay? What?
Yeah.
And then I really very quickly said, like, the repeated thoughts were like, chill the fuck out. Like, chill out. You don't have to have this, like, your identity is not crumbling. You don't have to be a lesbian because you slept with one girl. You can still have feelings for guys. This was when I was 26. I'm now 30. So there was just a lot going on in my head. And I had to just tell myself, just relax. Like, do what you want. You can still do this and do that. You don't have to be this way or that way. And now with my sexuality, I'm in a lesbian relationship and it's taken me a long time to be okay with people being like, you're gay, you're a lesbian. Because I identify as myself. I identify as Katie. And the person that taught me that was Georgia. I met Georgia and she said, I asked her about her sexuality. I was like, are you bi? Because she dates guys and girls. This is about almost 3 years ago when I said this to her.
Wow.
And she said, I'm just Georgia. And God, I needed to hear that. I needed to hear she's just herself. And I now have that thought, like I'm just me. Like when I was an athlete, I'm not just an athlete. When I was vegan, I'm not just vegan. Like, and now it's like, oh, I'm just me. And my sexuality is fluid and evolving and open. It doesn't have to be you're bi, gay, straight. Like some days I dress like a tomboy. Some days I'm really feminine. Like some days Georgia wears the pants. Some days I wear the pants. Like it doesn't have to be this black and white thing. It's constantly evolving. And it's so fine to just not put a label, because that was the thing that really screwed my mind up. And as soon as I was just leading with the heart and surrendering and just letting myself be curious and not judging myself, and sometimes you've just got to lean in to see what it feels like. Maybe it doesn't feel right. That's okay. If it doesn't feel right, that's all good. You take a step back. It's actually testing your own boundaries a little bit, but leading from the heart and actually sitting with how you feel, not your mom, not your dad, not your Catholic school, not anyone else's projected views, because you have to be strong in your sexuality. Otherwise, it's not worth it.
You touched on this before with the emotions, but what were some of the biggest unexpected surprises about entering a relationship with Georgia that surprised you in a positive way, or that you didn't expect coming into that relationship?
I think the level of emotional intimacy. I haven't experienced that level of emotional intimacy ever. I don't, I talk to G about it a lot, and we kind of often say, is it a girl thing or is it a human thing? Because I have met a lot of men that are really emotionally mature and in touch, but I've never dated one. And George is the same. She's never dated a really emotionally aware or really emotionally mature guy. So sometimes I think it's a girl thing, but sometimes I think maybe it's just a human thing. The difference with men and women for me has been when you date a woman, there is a lot more talk. For me, this is my experience. There's been a lot more talk about how we feel. There's been a lot more like intuition between us. I do feel that with a female connection, it's a bit more of a sixth sense.
Yeah.
You both have your periods, you both are more emotional. There's a lot more things that bond you, like you get your nails done, you go to saunas together. And for me in the relationships I've had with men, there was a lot more probably like adrenaline, thrill seeking.
Yeah.
Like I'm a tomboy, so like motorbike riding or jet skiing and that kind of stuff, or surfing. So for me, it's just been a very different, like I would bond with my ex-boyfriends over those activities. But then with Georgia, it's this like safe, holy, beautiful connection that I've never experienced in my life. But I've also fallen in love. And I don't think that I've ever really truly been in love until now. Like I've loved people and I thought I was in love, but now having fully been in love and actually truly accepting and loving her at her full capacity, that's just fucking amazing.
Well, that's really beautiful, Katie.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good spot to leave this on.
Yeah.
But before I do let you escape, I have a question which I ask everybody.
Yeah.
And this being the Becoming podcast, the question is, who are you becoming? Who's the most self-actualized version of Katie that you try to really step into every day?
When I meditate, I always call in higher self. And higher self is, I don't know, call it source, call it God, call it the universe. For me, the higher self version of me is more compassionate, allows a real balance of masculine and femme energy, doesn't judge myself, because when you judge others, you judge yourself and vice versa, and believes in myself. Something that I do struggle with is self-belief, even though it might not seem that way. I definitely have limiting beliefs that I'm working through. So the person I guess that I'm trying to become is someone who cares more about the shit that matters and less about the stuff that doesn't. And I think since turning 30, I've really removed myself from people and drama, and I hate gossip, I hate small talk, and I'm so much more discerning with who and what I spend my time on and with. So that version of me has stronger boundaries, more compassion, and probably knows what she stands for more. And I actually do believe that I am that person. There's just a lot of refining to go.
And maybe that will be an endless pursuit that
it's never going to end, because it's always evolving.
Yeah. Katie, thank you so much. That was very powerful. Guys, if you haven't heard it, go listen to Katie's podcast, Better For It, or find her on Instagram at Katie Williams. Thank you for coming on and sharing your value today.
Thank you, Nick.
Really appreciate you.
Loved it. Loved our chat.